Hello, and welcome to Missouri Law Matters. This is a new podcast all about your Missouri court system. My name is Matt Hamner, and I'm going to be your host on this journey that we're going to take through our court systems here in Missouri. Don't forget, if you enjoy our podcast, to like and subscribe on all of your podcast avenues of choice, Apple, Spotify. We're going to be on all the major places. And also, check out all of the new social media avenues that the Supreme Court of Missouri has on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you visit those pages and like and subscribe there as well. It's our hope that this podcast is going to be an evolving platform for our Missouri Judiciary to provide updates and information to you, the public, about our court system, its history, and all the amazing people that have made it work in these last many years. We are looking forward to using this platform as a voice, as a way to provide folks within our court system and folks in the public to get to know people that work in our court system, to find out some things about them, about the judiciary, the law, and maybe we'll even have a little fun along the way. I am excited about the prospect of having wonderful guests join me throughout the process of this podcast to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and their fabulous experiences with the court system. And I can't imagine better first guests for us to have on the initial podcast for Missouri Law Matters than the current Chief Justice of our Missouri Supreme Court, the Honorable Mary Russell. Judge Russell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Judge Hamner. It's wonderful to be here.
We really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are. So let's just start right with it. The first thing I note is that in September of this year, September of 2024, marks your 20th anniversary of being a judge on the Missouri Supreme Court. And next year, 2025, will mark your 30th anniversary as an appellate judge here in the state of Missouri. That's an incredible accomplishment and a lot of time spent doing this job. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm just like everybody else who always says, I can't believe it's been that long. I mean, it just seems like yesterday I joined this court, and it seems like maybe the day before yesterday that I became a judge in the first place. When I first started as a judge on the Court of Appeals, I was one of the youngest judges ever in the history of the Court of Appeals to serve. And I came in with a bunch of older men that were like my father's age, and people that I had appeared in front of and I had high respect for, men that I couldn't call by their first name because I'd always called them as judge. And I was always the young Turk in whatever court I was on. And now so much time has gone by that now I'm the old lady on the court. So I catch myself every once in a while saying, well, now we used to do it this way, or, back when I started here, and I have to stop and not be the historian all the time, but it's amazing how time has flown and how fortunate I've been to be in these positions for that long.
And how has that role reversal been for you? You mentioned you come in as you're the younger judge on the court, youngest judge. And then now you have, kind of moved up the line, and now you're one of the senior members of the court. And have you remembered, kind of what that felt like to be that young judge, and how does that affect how you treat the younger judges who work with you?
Well, I see myself more now as being the mentor for our newer members of the judiciary, as opposed to being mentored. But still at the same time, our newer members of the court, our younger members, they bring a lot of experience themselves, a lot of information, a different perspective. And so I find that, I learn from them still. There's always better ways of doing things, and there's different viewpoints and different thoughts on a variety of issues that I still try to be a learner and try to be a good listener.
That's excellent. And you mentioned changing over into more of a mentor type of a role. The legal profession is one of many professions where I think there's a lot of benefit to people who are getting involved in the process and getting involved in the profession to have mentors, to have people to show them the ropes and to pave the way. And sometimes, and not just in the legal profession, but in other professions, we're losing a little bit of that lately. How important do you think it is for young lawyers out there, or really anybody who's trying to learn a profession or get involved in something, to have a good mentor, to find somebody that they can trust with those things? How important do you think that is?
I just think it's imperative, Judge Hamner. I think that the fact that you're entered into a profession, not a job, when you start to practice law, you really don't know how to practice. In law school, we all learn the law, how to find the law, how to research, how to think, how to analyze. But how to set up a law practice, what equipment to buy, how to hire and fire, how to run your trust account, how to talk to clients. A lot of the real practical parts of law are not taught in law school. There's just not enough time. And that's something that you have to experience day in, day out in your work. And so I think having a mentor to bounce things off of, to say, how did you handle so-and-so attorney? How did you appear in this courtroom? Is just invaluable. Learning from experiences and mistakes other lawyers have made. And I feel sorry when we are handling attorney discipline cases and we see attorneys that make mistakes, potential ethical mistakes. If they'd only had a mentor to talk to, someone to advise them, to steer them a little differently, that they could have avoided those ethical mishaps. I still have a mentor today. I still have questions as I move through my career and think about future phases, and to ask people who've gone ahead of me how they handled certain situations. And I recommend everyone, especially in the legal profession, to have at least one mentor. And sometimes having multiple mentors is good to get, a variety of perspectives. I just think it's essential.
Thank you. What you said is really true. And what I have found in my trip through a legal career and through the legal process and being a lawyer and being part of this group of wonderful people who practice law is that you learn very quickly that while you may think you know everything, you never do. And no matter
Exactly
how
right.
long, no matter how long you practice law, no matter how long you do what it is that you do and how much experience you get, you will never know it all. There's always somebody who will have an answer that you don't have. And I think it's important, as you say, for lawyers to be open-minded to that, for judges to be open-minded to that, to everybody to be open-minded to the fact that no matter how long you've been doing it, no matter how much experience that you have, there is always somebody out there that has something that can help you.
I agree.
And staying open to that is really important. And I'm excited to hear you talk about mentoring and how important of a role that plays, because I couldn't agree with you more about that. You are now on your second term as Chief Justice of our Missouri Supreme Court. When were you first Chief Justice?
The last time I was Chief Justice was 2013 to 2015. And as you probably know, but most of our listeners wouldn't know, the Supreme Court of Missouri is different than the Supreme Court of the United States. As we all know, at the Supreme Court of the United States, the Chief Justice is a permanent role. And of course, in our federal court system, the Chief Justice can serve a lifetime term. In our state court system, the Missouri court system, on the bench, the maximum amount of time you can stay on the court is until your 70th birthday. But on our court, we rotate the responsibility of the Chief Justice amongst the 7 of us. And we each take a 2-year, sometimes I tease and say it's a 2-year sentence, but it's a 2-year term as the chief. And so I have been here long enough that the opportunity has rotated around to me again a second time. Doesn't happen very often, but it's a lot of extra responsibility and extra duties. But at the same time, it gives the person in the seat as the Chief Justice a little bit of a platform, if you will, a little bit of an opportunity to push some goals to improve the administration of justice, some opportunities to speak to various groups. One speech that the Chief Justice gives every year is the State of the Judiciary speech. It's similar to a speech that the President of the United States or the Governor of the state of Missouri gives to the legislative body, to both chambers, where you give some other major addresses, and you have an opportunity to educate the public a little bit more about what we do. And in that respect, it's fun to be the Chief Justice. Now, the day in, day out, some of the major decision-making, personnel matters, the administration of the judiciary is a little more, I'll just say, not as fun, but it's a wonderful opportunity to promote some of the goals that you have as far as how to improve the judiciary.
Excellent. Being involved in the court system myself and being a judge myself, I understand the responsibilities that come with your position of just being a judge on the Missouri Supreme Court as it is, and how much time that takes and how many responsibilities you have. I can't imagine how much it adds to, on top of that, to also have the responsibility of being the Chief Justice, of being the administrative head of the courts. And we're very appreciative of you for doing that. It's been 10 years or so since you were Chief Justice before. How has this term been different? Have you approached this one differently, or has this one felt different than the last time you were chief?
That it was 10 years ago is some of the advancements in technology. Here we are doing a podcast. 10 years ago, I don't think we would have ever dreamed of that. But my goals have changed because of the availability of technology. We can make the court more transparent and more accessible to the public than ever before. And so part of my in being chief is to try to utilize technology as best as possible to make the courts more visible and more accessible to the public. So here we are doing a podcast, which is a part of some of the social media outreach that the courts are now involved in, like the courts are in many other states, like many organizations do, like many other parts of government do. Courts are usually a little slow in some of these areas, but we're trying to inform the public more about the roles and responsibilities of judges and the judiciary. So, in addition to a podcast, we're hoping to have more footage on YouTube, to have space on some of the other social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And then just last month, we started for the first time ever at the Supreme Court, live video streaming of our oral arguments. We're the first court in Missouri to be live video of what's going on in the courtroom as it's happening. So you can go to the Supreme Court webpage and click on a link and watch us in action. And if you can't watch us live, if you want to watch an oral argument from a day, a month before, you can see an archive copy of the actual video from what happened in court. And our courts are always open. We love having people come watch what we do. All judges at all levels feel that way, but it's not practical for people to take off work or take time away from their personal responsibilities to travel to a courthouse. They're intimidated. They're not sure if they're welcome, or if they had an invitation or special permission to walk into a courtroom. But by just sitting in the comfort of wherever you are, anywhere in the world, you can watch us at any time and see, exactly what happens in a courtroom. And so those have been part of my goals. And then, did you know I was traveling around the state?
I did know that, and I was going to ask you about that. But I know as part of this on your second term as chief, one of the goals that you had set and one of the things that you had talked about is you wanted to get around the state and see everybody. You wanted to tour all of the judicial circuits in our state and get out there and see everybody and kind of put boots on the ground and find out what's happening. Tell me a little bit about that tour. How's that been going?
Well, it's great. And it's a huge state, by the way. When I made the commitment that I was going to visit every circuit in the state, and by the way, for people who don't realize it, our state is divided into 46 circuits. Of course, we have 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis, but I'm not visiting every county. I'm just visiting every circuit. Some circuits are 1 counties, but some circuits are 3 to 5 counties. In any event, the purpose of my visit is to thank the unsung heroes, our frontline workers, our circuit clerks, our juvenile officers, bailiffs, all the other folks that run our courts day in, day out, that are behind the scenes and never get the recognition, the appreciation that they deserve. Thrown a lot of extra administrative responsibilities on them over the last few years. I just wanted to apologize for all the work we've given them to do, in addition to their daily full-time jobs, but also to thank them, to listen to them, to hear concerns they have, answer questions. If there's things that we could do better here in Jefferson City, to learn what those things could be. And so I've so enjoyed meeting the wonderful people that work behind the scenes that make the judges look good and turn the lights on and unlock the doors and keep us in operation everywhere in the state. And so right now I visited 31 of the 46 circuits. So if my math is correct, I've got 15 more circuits to go. My goal is to get them completed by the end of June, which is when my term as Chief Justice ends. And I grew up near Hannibal, and my dad was a dairy farmer, which, if people understand that, that means your dad works 365 days a year. You never get to take a trip away from home. It's more than 2 hours because you've got to get back for milking time. A lot of places I've never been able to visit before. And so it's a beautiful state, and it's full of many wonderful citizens that I have so enjoyed getting to see some things in every town that I've visited, and learning a little bit about their history, learning a little bit about the culture. I mean, it's a pretty varied state all the way from the Boot Hill to Northwest Missouri. It's very interesting. And I tell the folks that I visit with that my motive is pure. I mean, I don't invite media. I'm not there to get media attention, and I'm not running for office. So I'm just purely there to say thank you, and to listen and learn from the fine people that work in our courts.
Excellent. There's so much wonderful stuff there. Certainly, I want to echo something that you had mentioned about thanking the people and all the extra work that we put on. We're not that far removed from a pandemic that I'm sure we'd all like to forget. But during that process, it was challenging for everybody. But I don't think people realize how challenging it was, particularly for our court system. You're talking about a system that is primarily driven by people having face-to-face interactions, having to figure out basically overnight how to conduct tens of thousands of cases without having face-to-face interactions. It was a lot, and it was a lot that was put on our staff and our clerks. And I love and I'm very appreciative of you for getting out there and thanking them for all of the efforts, the unsung heroes that we had during that entire process, because it was a lot. And they deserve all the thanks that they can get for that. And I'm grateful to you for doing that. I'm excited to hear that you had so much fun seeing the state. I know you grew up in Hannibal on a dairy farm and you didn't get to travel much. I grew up at Lake the Ozarks. My family ran a resort. We were the same way. The summers and the fun times were for work, and we were working while everybody else was having a good time. So now that you're finally getting out and getting able to go around the state and see some stuff, what's your favorite thing you've seen so far? What have you enjoyed seeing around the state of Missouri that you hadn't had a chance before?
Well, the beautiful courthouses, there are some really historic buildings that local counties have kept up so nicely. And it's just exciting to see and hear some of the history of the buildings and the people in the community, all the courthouse squares, the Cannonball and Lexington Courthouse in Lexington, Missouri. I'm not going to say I have a favorite because I love them all, but it's been very interesting to see the variety of courthouse structures and even some modern ones too. But, the courthouse in most communities, if not all, is kind of the economic hub of the community. But for that courthouse being there and the businesses around the square, I think some communities would dry up. And so courthouses are such an important historic structure in the past and in years to come.
Well, and I would certainly not ever ask you to pick your favorite courthouse or your favorite county or circuit in the state. I would never do that to you, but I appreciate that you've enjoyed all that so much. You mentioned growing up in Hannibal, raised on a dairy farm there. Talk to me a little bit about that community and what it was like growing up there. I grew up like the Ozarks, which is kind of a touristy community. It's a small town, but also a touristy community with lots of people. I would think that Hannibal has some of that as well, with some tourist activity, but at the same time, it's also a small town where everybody kind of knows everybody.
Yes, Hannibal, the major industry in Hannibal is tourism, and it's all around Mark Twain, and probably didn't appreciate that enough until I became an adult. But out on the farm, we were just 3 miles from town, but it felt like 100. My dad worked every day. My mother didn't have a driver's license. And so it was few opportunities to go into town to take care of errands and activities and business. But I felt a little removed from some of that while growing up, just because life was busy on the farm. I was one of 5 kids. We all had responsibility when we were old enough to help, whether it was working in the garden or driving the tractor for my dad. Well, my brothers helped stack the bales of hay on the wagon behind it. My dad did most of the work in milking the cows, and he really did want us to study and to make good grades. And so I'm thankful that I had the opportunity then to excel in school and to go on to college with some good scholarships. But for having those good scholarships, I would not have been able to afford to attend college and on to law school. A wonderful community that I lived in, great neighbors. I learned what neighborly meant. I learned how, you help everyone else and they help you. I lived in Hannibal after I graduated from law school and came back to work in a small law practice. And it was just a great opportunity to get involved in community organizations to help the community. I became, I think, the second woman president of the Hannibal Chamber of Commerce and got involved in a lot of different organizations just to make Hannibal a better place.
That's excellent. And it doesn't sound like, you describe your mom and your dad and growing up on the dairy farm. It doesn't sound like there were a lot of lawyers or other professionals in your family. What along the line made you think, I should become a lawyer?
Well, my paternal grandfather, who lived on the farm too, was a really smart, self-educated man. He had dropped out of school in the 8th grade, but he loved to study and read. In fact, when he retired, he taught himself Spanish. Now, this is back in the days before any kind of online classes, but he would tape himself and buy other tapes of people speaking Spanish, and he would mail in his assignments. They were called correspondence classes. And so as young children, he would talk Spanish to us. And as a young child, he would tell us, brain is a sponge. You can learn this so much quicker and easier than I can. And, we kind of rolled our eyes and, okay, Grandpa, but he was so right. And many of the words and the conversational phrases that he taught us as children, I can rattle off today. I did go ahead and take the 4 years of Spanish in high school. And then I tested out of it in college, so I never got to take it again. But while I was in college, Grandpa and I would write letters to each other in Spanish just so we could kind of keep up on our at least our writing skills in Spanish. But he always said, get all the education you can get. And again, as a little kid, you kind of rolled your eyes at Grandpa like it was a broken record. It's all he ever said over and over. So as I was finishing college with a degree in journalism with a goal of being able to work in the print media and to be a consumer affairs reporter where I would write stories and try to expose consumer products that were defective or misrepresented to the public to protect the public. I started thinking about law school because I had done some internships in the state capitol in the Missouri House, and I'd done an internship in Congress and was kind of bit by the legal bug. And so I thought, I'll just take the law school admittance test, the LSAT, and see if I do very well. And I did. And I had a great GPA. So I thought, well, I'll just try and see if I, would be admitted into law school. And of course, the best law school in the state at that time was University of Missouri. And I was just hopeful I could be accepted there in 2 hours of Hannibal. So at least my dad could make it there and back on for milking purposes, and was accepted. But I thought when I entered law school that I knew one thing for sure, that I never, ever, 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 ever where I am today.
Isn't it funny how that happens?
It is. I had no confidence in myself. I had no public speaking ability and didn't want to run the risk of my miscues in a courtroom resulting in someone being convicted or losing a civil case. And I thought I would be better behind the scenes doing transactional work than drafting documents and staying out of a courtroom.
It's funny that you say that because over so many other professions that I know, my experience in the law and going through law school, I think there are more people in the legal profession that are doing something completely different in that profession than they thought they were going to do when they started law school. I mean, it's so common that you start law school with one idea of what it is that you want to do and what you're going to do. And during the process of learning about the law, or even those first couple of years working in the law, you find something else that you're passionate about that you didn't even know about. But all of a sudden you discover this thing that you're really interested in and that you maybe are a little good at. And then all of a sudden that becomes your path that you didn't even know about, 3 or 4 years earlier. And that's one of the great things about the law is there's just so many areas that you can find to find your niche, to find your kind of your home. And I love that despite the fact that you had no interest in being in the courtroom, here you are now having been in a courtroom for the vast majority of your legal career. And that's incredible.
What about you? What did you want to do when you started law school? What did you think you would be doing?
I wanted to be a sports agent, believe it or not. I wanted to hang with the athletes. I wanted to fly on the nice jets and have fun and do all that stuff. Well, and that was all great and fine, except when I got into law school and started learning about the process of being an agent and doing those things, found out really to be an agent, you have to know athletes. And I didn't know that many athletes at the time, and certainly not enough to get my foot in the door. And so rather than become a sports agent. And with that dream crush, I decided I better figure out something else to do. So I decided I wanted to try cases in a courtroom, and that eventually led me to the bench myself.
So I love sports too, and I would have loved to have been a sports agent, but really wasn't feasible for a girl to do that, back when I was starting out my career. But yeah, if I could do my life over and gender differences weren't there, that would be a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the gender differences, and certainly the era that we're in now is certainly a lot different than the era that you came up in
Thank goodness.
as a law student, as a young lawyer, as a young judge. Talk to me a little bit about the change that you have seen in our profession, not just in the law specifically, but also on the bench, and the changes that we've seen in Missouri with respect to the elevation of women to roles of power.
Well, it's been exciting because I never ever would have imagined, dreamed in my wildest dreams that someday the Supreme Court of Missouri would have a majority of female judges. And I'm still giddy about it. It's just been almost a year that this has taken place. When I first started practicing back home in my hometown of Hannibal, I was kind of a novelty. It was rare to see a woman in the courtroom. And I was young, of course. And so being young and being a woman, you kind of had a couple of strikes against you, and you had to work a little extra hard to prove your ability as a lawyer. Some courthouses around the state required women attorneys, if they were going to be in a courtroom, to wear a skirt or a dress. I tell that story to young women today, and they laugh and say, well, why did you put up with that? Well, there wasn't very many of us. We were the minority gender. We were new, and you just played by the rules. You didn't argue. You didn't protest. You accepted the rules and you played by them because we wanted to be respected and treated as equals. We didn't want our gender to be noticed and to stand out. We wore our blazers with our little ties up here, and very kind of a masculine look to how we how our attire was. But I knew which courthouses required me to wear a skirt and which ones didn't. I typically wore a skirt anyway, or a business suit, just because I wanted to look professional. But it's just been amazing over time to see more women in our law schools. In fact, today, I think every law school in Missouri is a majority female. The quantity of women in the practice, I want to guess that we're probably up to 40% of the total bar population is female, but that's a guess. I probably need to get that solidified. But you see more women in all areas of the practice. And hence now, a number of years have passed, more women are interested in becoming judges. They have the years of experience and the variety of experience that qualifies them just like their male counterparts. And it's just so exciting for me to see more female judges all across the state when I've been traveling, more female elected prosecuting attorneys across the state. And so you just see women in every role, which is amazing to me when I think back to when I was the novelty and the only woman in line to use the women's restroom at conferences. And now, because there's so many women, there's actually a line. So that's exciting. And I just tell the young women to keep trying and keep going hard, and they're doing a good job, and I'm just so very proud of them.
I'm very aware of that history and kind of the path that our profession has been on for a long time. But it's odd because, I started law school in 1994. I graduated law school in 1998, also from the University of Missouri, Columbia. And my class was fairly diverse. I was very excited actually about the diversity of the people that I got to study law with and learn about. But when I got out into the profession and started practicing law, the profession itself, the lawyers that were practicing were getting more diverse. There were more of different ethnicities. There were more females, lots of diversity. But the place that we didn't see as much diversity at that time was, as you mentioned, on the bench. There wasn't quite as much there as it was. And since 1998, when I graduated law school, to today, now being a judge, I am very excited and very happy to see how much more diverse our bench has gotten and how much more diverse, the face of justice has gotten in the state of Missouri. I think that's been a wonderful thing, not only for our profession, but also for the public, because it always helps. The more that we have people that represent everybody that's present in the state, the better off we're going to be and the better perceived our justice is going to be. So I'm with you on that. I think we've made a lot of progress in that regard, and I'm very excited to see where we go in the future.
I think it just builds more public trust and confidence in the court when people see judges that look like them. And maybe it's a gender difference. Maybe it's a racial difference. Maybe it's a judge who grew up in an area where they're from, who understands fencing law, someone who's maybe walked in their shoes, someone who understands urban issues. It's important to have a good variety on our benches, and we learn from each other. Judges from the city teach me a lot of things that I never would have ever known, and I can maybe hopefully teach them some things about agricultural law and life in the rural parts of our state. It's wonderful to have that diversity. It builds strength in the court. We learn from each other. Maybe it's practice areas. Maybe someone who's practiced exclusively criminal law, and I practice more civil law. So we learn from each other by all the experiences we've had, both professionally and personally.
Couldn't agree more. And certainly all the things that we have talked about today, where you've come from, the private practice, all your years of experience as being a judge. Talk to me a little bit about what are just a few of your favorite things that you do to stay connected to your community, to kind of give back with what little free time that you have.
Well, my most favorite of all is going to speak to different organizations, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a service club, a church group, or senior citizens, talking to them about how the judiciary works and explaining what we do. That's my most favorite thing, because there's really no one source to go to for the public to understand how courts work. And maybe the source doesn't explain it in layman's language. So I love to go in and in essence, see the light bulb go on in people's heads of like, so that's what judges do. That's how courts work. I take some audio-visual equipment with me, and then one of the most favorite part is the part where I call it "You Be the Judge," where I give the audience the facts to a case that we actually had here at the Supreme Court, and then I show them the law that the legislature wrote that we have to interpret. I remind them that the legislature writes the laws, the judiciary branch interprets those laws, and ask them then how they would decide the case. And of course, just to make it interesting, I pick a case in which the statute, the law, is maybe a little ambiguous, a little unclear in its wording, especially as applied to the facts of the case. And in some instances, it could result in the audience, the court, if you will, coming up with a result that nobody likes generally. The public doesn't care for this answer. It may be allowing a drunk driver to go free. It may be a case where it ends up in a civil result that you personally did not like that interpretation. But you take an oath as a judge to follow the law as it's written. It's not our job to rewrite the law. You have to interpret the words as they're written by the legislature, and to show them that although the headline may say, Judge Hamner lets drunk driver go free, Judge Hamner didn't like doing that. But perhaps maybe even the officer who arrested the person violated their constitutional rights in some manner. And so if you want to follow and obey the Constitution and protect people's constitutional rights, it results in maybe an acquittal, which nobody likes, but constitutional rights are supreme. I love them to see, oh, I can see now what judges do. I understand these are tough decisions. And of course, the cases that come to us are the toughest ones in the state. And we reach results that we personally may disagree with, but legally we're required to issue that opinion. So that's my favorite thing, is to go out and explain to people what we do and let them ask me questions that there's no other source to go to.
And all of that is exactly why you were the perfect first guest for our podcast today, because that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast, is to give people kind of some insight and a look into how judges make these decisions and what this job really is and what the legal system really does. And it's important for people to kind of get to pull the curtain back a little bit and see that, and to know that these are difficult decisions, and that judges, when they make decisions, they're not making those decisions based on what's popular at the time or what the headlines are going to be the next day. They're making the decisions based on the law. We take an oath to follow the law, and we have to follow that law the way it is. And whether we like it or not, that's, the law is the law, and we follow the law. And so I'm so grateful with all the time that you've had, that you've given us some of that time today to talk to us about this podcast. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you at least a couple more things. All the things that you have to do as a Supreme Court judge and with your time, what do you like to do for fun? I mean, what do you do when you need to blow off steam and just say, I need a break? What do you do then?
Well, I have a lot of interest, and unfortunately, I don't get to do many of these activities right now, but I love spending time with my grandchildren. I've got some really young grandchildren that live close by that are a lot of fun. Helping them discover and learn things is exciting, and I try to come up with a craft project every time they come to my house, which is challenging.
So you're the cool grandma.
Well, I like to think I am, but
it sure sounds like you are.
The jury may be out on that, but I love sports too. I love to follow our Chiefs. I love to follow our Major League Baseball teams. I love Mizzou sports. So I love going to those events or watching them on television. I wish I had more time to cook, because I keep tearing out recipes and putting them on my counter that someday I'm going to make. I love to garden, just a little flower and herb garden in my yard. So, and if I had more time, I like to read for pleasure, which right now is at a minimum, but I enjoy all those things.
I'm happy to hear that you still read for pleasure. I struggle with that greatly. My trip through law school and my legal career there's so much reading involved. It's really made it difficult for me to read for pleasure. So I'm glad to hear that you still enjoy that. Last question that I have for you, and I'm going to ask everybody this who comes on the podcast: what is the best thing that you have seen lately? It could be a TV show, a movie, a play, a sporting event, just something that you have seen lately. Well, what's been the favorite thing you've seen lately?
I guess one of the things that I like to see is someone helping somebody else, someone showing kindness, someone extending a hand and helping another person in need. That's just what we're about as individuals and as people. And that's why I believe we're put here on earth, is to be helpful to others. And I love seeing someone assisting others in need, whether it's from personal health issue or a natural disaster. I love seeing others help each other, and that warms my heart.
I can't think of a better place to leave it. Chief Justice Russell, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being our first guest and being willing to take this journey with us. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it hasn't been too painful. I hope you come back and see us again if we've got something fun to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Hamner, and thank you for being the host of this great program, and good luck to you on your future interviews.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who's listening and watching us on YouTube and on the various platforms. Thank you for being here today. Keep your eyes on this space. We're going to have more episodes coming. Don't forget again to like and subscribe on your various podcast platforms of choice, also on YouTube once those videos go up there. And follow Missouri Supreme Court on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and those platforms as well. We again appreciate you for joining us today. Without anything further, this this podcast is adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.